Morning. To any of our visitors and guests, welcome to Immaculate Heart of Mary. Normally I have a deacon with me. I'm flying solo this morning. We're on a little bit of a skeleton crew. Our organist, Marilyn, recently had knee surgery. So if you're a visitor or a parishioner, you can say a little prayer for her and for her recovery. It's coming along. To all of our parishioners, always good to pray with you. Talking to Bob, one of our greeters out in front this morning, I said, no homily today. And he said, I mean, we're going to get a sermon? And he said, yes, you're going to get a sermon. Here's my difference, how I define them. Homilies should always be about Scripture. Focus on what the readings are. We're in the midst of the Bread of Life discourses, and we know there's trouble coming because they're already murmuring. Things are only going to get worse for Jesus because nobody's been rejected like him coming. But no homily today. Just know there's trouble percolating already. They do not like what Jesus is saying. Sermons, for better or worse, can be about anything whatsoever that a bishop, a priest, or a deacon chooses to talk about. So today's sermon, I just want to invite you to listen to how I kind of process things in the last year. We know that a year ago today, which was a Saturday, there was a whole altercation and the unfortunate events that happened in Ferguson between Officer Wilson and Michael Brown. And last month, at the beginning, right around the 4th of July, I wrote about it a little bit in the bulletin of trying to say, how do we think clearly about this? And over the year, I've been praying about it a lot. So here's the first thing that I just want to share with you, how I react to it all. There are few people in life that I truly despise. I mean, you really have to be a pretty heinous person for me to despise you. And I haven't met anybody I've ever despised yet. But I have a hard time dealing with the reality of Dorian Johnson, who is the friend of Michael Brown that was there when that young man had the run-in with the police officer and was ultimately killed. Now, there are worse people in the world because you just look over the Middle East and we have people who are cutting off heads, crucifying people, torturing, and doing truly horrific, inhumane acts. They're on a whole nother level of evil in my book. But with Dorian Johnson, we know now, a year later looking back, cooked up one of the most divisive lies to come into American culture. And the lie is unfortunately a rallying cry for everything that's happened in the last year. Hands up, don't shoot. We all know it. We've heard it. But we know this, more than likely that is at best an exaggeration, and more than likely it's a lie. And that's all because of forensics. And if there's one thing you and I at least want to place some trust in is there are things that give us concrete facts based on more than opinions of what happened. We know that the young man was shot in the back a couple times, but it all started with an altercation in the police car. There's evidence there that he tried to take the gun from the officer. And we know how that story would have played out. Officer Wilson would have been killed. There would have been nothing else said about it. And a year would have passed, and that would have been that. He would have just been another dead police officer. But what has happened, we know, is that he didn't yield his gun. The young man probably fled the scene. He yelled, stop, shot at him, finally turned around. Looks like from the forensics he came at the police officer and then was lethally shot. A horrible experience. Obviously for Michael Brown, he's dead. And for Officer Wilson, who had to be involved in that whole altercation. Because no person ever wants to kill another person. Talk to any of our veterans and the suffering that they experience when they've had to be involved with taking lives of other people who they knew would kill them if they didn't. And so we look at this situation, I've been praying about it a lot. Dorian Johnson is the person I despise. I despise because he cooked up a whole story which is an exaggeration and a falsehood. And I pray for him, believe it or not enough. I should pray for him a lot more. But look at the events that happened a year ago on Sunday. That's when everything started coming unglued. Businesses got broken into, burned down, assaults happening, all based on the outrage that somebody was innocently killed. Because the lie is that he was on his hands and knees with his hands in the air saying, don't shoot, and the police officer just came up and killed him for the sake of killing him. That is the emotional impetus behind all of the rioting. And we know this, we can be honest. We have a problem in this country of trying to heal the wounds of racism. The largest shadow ever cast on the land of liberty is the fact that we had a slave culture in the southern part of our states. We believe all men are created equal, except for the ones we own. So, we have to be honest about that. And that has cast a very long shadow. And it is a wound that needs to be healed. And it has to be healed by you and I trying to be articulate and prayerful and patient in our truth. And be honest about how we look at people. So, I look at Walter here. He's Anglo, he's male, he's tall. Those are things I assess within a second. When I look at somebody, I'm looking at your gender, what I believe is your ethnicity, though I could be completely wrong on that, and then maybe something else about you. He's also got a beard and mustache, which I like facial hair, so go Walter. And you look at those things. They're inconsequential to what you know about a person. And yet we know then we look at appearance. He's dressed good for church, so thumbs up. We're all happy with that. But I'll be honest, if I'm walking down the street, I don't have to worry about it here in New Melle. But when I was in St. Louis City for the last 10 years, if I saw a group of young guys, black or white, didn't matter what their ethnicity was, with their pants hanging down, practically barely above their knees, and they had kind of the I don't care look, I wasn't going to go walk into the crowd of them because I didn't want to take the chance of having any sort of altercation. Now, they could be the best, nicest people in the world, so I could be completely wrong in my judgment. But we know this, what you and I wear, how we choose to market ourselves to the world is making a statement. And we should know that. If we're not aware of appearance is making a statement, we need to wise up. Maybe the only thing you're doing is practical. It's the next thing on the shelf and you grabbed it and that's what you're wearing. In which case the statement you're making is, I don't think much about clothing, I just grab something as I go out the door. But that is making a statement. The same thing is looking at words. We want to look at our appearance and we want to be responsible about that. But we also want to look at our words. And we know words can be used to bring us together as part of the ritual of the Mass. We know that words can be used to divide us. Now, I'm 48. I caught the tail end in the late 60s and early 70s of a whole slew of Polak jokes. Now, and we can chuckle. I don't know why. I'd never met anybody who was Polish in my childhood. Why those jokes were so prevalent. And they were always, the Polacks were not very bright. That's how the jokes always ran. Now, that's not severe, and we can chuckle at things like that. But every group has faced that in almost every culture. I mean, if you say, Dave Gentry's Irish, what do you know about them? Look, man, they sure can drink. They can put it away. You think he's a drunk? I don't know anything about him, but he's Irish, probably drunk. Well, maybe. I'm related to half Irish, so a lot of them are alcoholics, but not all of them. And we have to look at things like that and the way we use our words. I'll give you an example. When I first came to New Melle, and it was mentioned in the bulletin at one time, and somebody else kindly wrote about it, I got to know a lot of guys in construction. And my dad was a machinist, so he wasn't really involved in construction. He was sitting at his little bench grinding stuff at his jig grinder. But I got to know a lot of guys in construction, going over the smokehouse, down to Liz's, fireside. And one of the things I noticed right away is a number of them, not all of them, some did not, a lot of them, they use GD every other word. Really? Do you not realize what you're saying? And I was a new guy, so I didn't make a big stink about it for a while. And then after about 3 months, 6 months, I said, hey, do you realize what you're saying? You are asking God to damn whatever, something usually inconsequential. And I care about God. I respect him. And that's one of the very simple ways I can show my respect for him. And I knew for most of them, they didn't want God to damn anything. That's just the way they talked. And it takes some awareness and a little push from us as friends, because that's what I want to be. I want to be a friend. I'm not there as Father Tom, pulling out my sword of, I got a Roman collar and you ought to clean up your act. I'm your neighbor, and I care about you, and I respect you, and I want you to respect me. And most of them that were the more egregious offenders of that, they cleaned up their act. Not completely. I mean, we all get sloppy. Because here's what I'm going to look at. If somebody says a bad word that I find offensive, like our Irish drinking friend's wife, Patricia, I'm not going to go bananas on her because I know her. Now, if she consistently uses bad language, I'm going to ask, what gives? Because I care about her. You know, why do you speak that way? Do you know what that communicates? And we know when we talk, I mentioned pull-out jokes earlier, there's all kinds of jokes out there. Some that are harmless, like all you ladies that are blonde, we all know those jokes. We know what they're about. Is it possible that maybe some blonde women are airheads? I guess. Enough to make jokes about, but probably not enough too. And you and I want to be aware of our language and its impact on others. The other thing is this. Here's the flip side of being aware. The flip side is this. If you go around waiting to get your feelings hurt, you will. Every time you will find something to hurt your feelings or upset you. So I don't mind jokes about Irish being alcoholics or wanting to get in fights with everybody or being resentful. I don't even mind jokes about priests. And some of them have been pretty harsh in light of the scandal that happened, 12 years ago. Usually it's jokes about, having a second collection, or I have alcohol stored away in the confessional or something. Those type of jokes. And I don't mind them. I can live with them. But we want to look at our language and look at how it either builds bridges with other people or how it dissolves them. And if you have some harboring resentment towards people who are black or Hispanic, or pick your favorite ethnic group you don't like, you really need to ask the Lord to help you, and I need to ask Him to help pray that we overcome that. That we treat people like individuals that we want to get to know and trust and love and respect. And we want to listen to the people that God places in our life to help us to be better. I'll give you one clear example. Growing up, I always used to use the word gypped. Sharon gypped me. She went to my yard sale, bought my lamp, and she gypped me. Now, I didn't think there was anything wrong with the word gypped. Just meant you got cheated. Well, the word gypped comes from gypsies, assuming that people of Eastern European descent are a bunch of swindlers. Now, I didn't know that, and I suspect many of the people who heard me use that word didn't know it either. But once I knew it, I stopped using it. Because I don't know too many people who are Romanian or Hungarian. But if I do, and maybe you are and I don't even know it, I want to treat you with respect. I don't want to take a generalization that assumes you're somehow an inherent cheat. And those are just simple things as we look back on the year, as we're trying to become better individuals and a better society. And there are too many things to divide us, and not enough to unite us. And we want to pray today, especially for whatever happens today in Ferguson or this evening, whatever happens in our nation, for the healing of all those divisions. Because here's the bottom line. The more divisions that happen in our life, the greater chance we are going to be afraid of what comes from them. And God doesn't want you and I to live in fear. He wants us to live with confidence and hope and faith. And the only way to make that happen out in the world is to deepen the bonds of communion that you and I experience here at Mass. And it isn't ever going to be done on a large scale. It's going to be done just like Jesus does it, one life at a time. And that's what I want to commit myself to, and I pray that's what you want to commit yourself to. Because I'll notice things about you. I mean, there's all kinds of things we notice. But they don't form my heart. My heart doesn't get set on you till I get to spend some time with you and listen to you and to see your character and to know your friendship. Then I make decisions about you being a good person, or maybe a person who needs a lot more improvement, a person who's on the walk with Jesus Christ, or a person who's gone off the walk and needs to be called back. One life at a time. and to set aside my temptation to be lazy, because that's really one of the feeding sources for racism and for generalizations. We're just lazy. We want to talk about people as groups and not deal with individuals. And that laziness ends up feeding into fear and hatred. And we don't have time for that. We've only got 80 years or so, the Bible tells us, to get our act together for God, to love Him and to love our neighbor. And we pray today on this anniversary in our area as we remember and pray for Ferguson and for St. Louis, that you and I will be committed to that, to trying to acquire the eyes and the mind and the heart of Jesus Christ.